everybody. It's so exciting. We are having so much fun trying to figure out how many different live platforms that we can be on at once. We've got Zoom people here. We've got Instagram. We think we've got Facebook going on 2 different channels. And we have all you wonderful people who came in person to celebrate Kadian and her wonderful memoir, Leaving a Charmed Life, a true story of choosing authentic happiness. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're so excited about this book because it has been 4 years in the making. I have to give a shout out to our friend Ainsley McLeod, an author and psychic who lives in Seattle. And he is how Kadian and I came together.
Yes.
He introduced us in 2019, but actually I remember in 2009, I was working for a publishing company called Sounds True. And he called me to tell me that he was doing a workshop in South Africa called the Soul Safari. And that's where Kadian met Ainsley. And that's where Kadian met her friend, Megan Reynolds, who's here tonight. And it feels like 10 years before all of that started is when the seeds for this really got planted.
I agree. Yes.
So thank you. I am Shelly Francis. I am Kadian's editor, friend, and publisher with Creative Courage Press.
Yes.
And you're Kadian Grant, who
everybody knows. Hi. Hi. Thank you all for being here. This means so much to me. And I am truly overwhelmed with all of the text messages and emails and shout outs and calls. Started at 6 a.m. when my memoir debuted on Tuesday. I was just so overwhelmed. I really don't have the words to thank you all for your support. And I want to thank my beautiful children. Camilla, my oldest, stand up and say hi to everyone. My son, Khaleel, say hi. And my baby, Kyra. They are my greatest inspiration and my greatest love in this world. And I want to thank Megan Reynolds, who has been crucial on this journey of the publishing part of the book. She came on as a team member, and her skills and experience was so needed to do things I do not like to do. So thank you for keeping me focused and keeping me organized and on time with everything. And thank you so much. And of course, my publisher, Shelly Francis. We have grown beyond publishing. We started working together February of 2020, and that's when COVID hit and everything shut down. And that just gave us time to really focus because we couldn't go anywhere. We were on lockdown, and we really focused. And she's more than a publisher. She's my mentor. I feel like when I started this journey, I knew nothing about writing until I met Shelly. I've grown so much. I had a story, but she helped me put this together. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. And it's just so much fun to see the book that we have now, this beautiful memoir, isn't at all what you came to me with your original manuscript.
No, not at all.
So tell us first how you even decided you wanted to write a book, and what was your vision for a book?
I did not have a vision for a book. I did not know I was writing a book. I just had a lot of pain within myself. And one of the things I've always done as a child was write my feelings down to get the pain from within outside. I don't know how I knew to do that, but that's what I did since I was a kid. So in 2012, there was a serious situation going on with a family member, my mom, I should just say, because you're going to read the book and you know. And a lot of feelings conjured up again. And I just needed the pain out. It just brought up a lot of pain. So I started to write. And when I was done writing that day, it was thousands of words. And I just kept writing every day. And it ended up being 65, 70 words. And I was talking to somebody, they said, that's a book. I'm like, really? That's a book? They're like, that's a book. So that began my book journey. It wasn't really something I set out to do, but Ainsley McLeod that she mentioned, who I met in 2009, told me that I was a writer in this life. And I thought, well, he was wrong on that. Honestly, I was like, yeah, you're not right. And here I am, a writer. So he was correct. So that's how my journey of this book began.
Well, what was the kind of courage that you needed to write the book?
Oh, it was a lot of courage. I had to dig deep. I come from a family of strong women where we can endure a lot. So we keep a lot of things inside and we just keep going. So I had to really muster up the courage to be honest and write all about it, because it's not something I knew to do. It's not something we did in my family. This is outside of the norm of my family. So it was a lot of courage to do that.
So tell us in short what your book is about for the people who've just heard a little bit about it or maybe don't know much.
Yeah, so Living a Charmed Life is about breaking generational patterns and trauma to live the life you came here to live, to be who you are in this world, and to find true happiness, because my happiness was based on what I was taught as a child. It wasn't my happiness, it was my parents' happiness, and that was through material things. And my book is about breaking the generational patterns to find who Kadian was and to find my true happiness.
So start by telling us what your charmed life looked like.
My charmed life was just that. It's not a rich life. I wasn't a princess or anything like that, but I had everything material-wise. The moment I landed in this country at 6 years old, I had a beautiful pink room. It was just so gorgeous, walk-in closet, all the clothes I can have. And that's how I was raised, on material goods. When my father took it to school, my father had 5 cars at one time. So every day he took it to school with a different car we drove in, and so I learned that. So I went on to school. I got a good job in a corporation, and I started to do those things that I was taught as a child to do, to have a house and material things. And of course, society said, oh, you want the American dream, right? To have a house, how many cars, 2.5 children. So I had all of that. My life was very good. My ex-husband and I, we made great money. Kids traveled all the time, went on cruises. Christmas was wonderful. We just had everything. So that was my charmed life. I lived in a great neighborhood, and so that was it. I didn't want for anything, and my children didn't want for anything. So I always tell them they don't know what it's like to be poor or in need of anything. They're kind of privileged. And that's the life I thought they should have.
But despite all of that, you weren't happy. And at one point you actually described, I think you named it as postpartum depression, but it was deeper than that. So
it was so much deeper than that. Yes. As we're going along and I have everything, I started to get depressed. Even with everything I had, and I couldn't figure out why I was depressed, because I had everything that society say I should have to be happy. And I was unhappy. And I had to pay attention to those feelings within myself. I had to look at it. I had to really feel it. I couldn't just let them be, because every day I got up, those feelings were there. And it was like I was sinking. So I started to look at it. Yeah.
Well, and what was it that started pulling you up out of the depression? What did you need to do for yourself?
It would be my children, because I saw the decline and I didn't want them to go through what I was going through. I didn't want them to be depressed in their life. I didn't want them to have unhappiness. So they were my first inspiration to get up and seek what I need to find happiness.
I want to go back a little bit because, you know, the title is Leaving a Charmed Life. And I don't know how many of you know that Kadian's nickname as a little girl was Charm. So of course we made that play on words, but it feels like you actually have two main characters in your book. There's you, Kadian, and then there's Charm.
Correct.
How do you think of Charm as almost outside of yourself? Or tell us more about Charm.
Charm was the aspect of me that my family created. That was my nickname. When I came to this country, I didn't even realize my name was Kadian, to be honest, because everybody called me Charm. The only reason I got used to Kadian is because you have to give your proper name in school. So I was Kadian at school, but when I got home, I was Charm. And that was the life I was living. And that was the person that was the main character at the time, because my parents had such an influence on me. Yeah.
And then you described having a protagonist and an antagonist of the story of your life.
Yes.
Tell us about that
I was
storybook
both. I was both. I realized that one day when I was, trying to achieve all these goals, and one of my goals for happiness wasn't happening. And I realized I was the protagonist and the antagonist in my life, the person that was driven to live the life that was created for me. And there was the real me antagonizing me and saying, that's not the way to go. Is that real happiness? Like, a lot of questions was coming up. This person just kept nagging me. My other aspect, I should say, kept nagging me about life and happiness. And do you really want to do this? Is this what you want? So that's the difference. It's the two people. And I think we all have that within ourselves. If you are, was raised a certain way and you're older, you're not in agreement with that. And there's a part of you that doesn't agree with that. And there's a part of you that just go with the flow because that's what you know and that's what you've been taught.
So it feels like your book is very much a story of mothers and daughters and grandmothers and great grandmothers. This is the line of women
in my family, yeah.
Going backwards. So what did you learn about, what surprised you maybe, or what did you learn about the women in your life from the writing of the book itself?
They were very strong women. They were all depressed women. But they all had to be strong to continue on the path they were on. So they will put themselves aside for their children and for their household and for their husbands or significant other, just to keep going in life. That's what I learned about them, just to keep going. And then I wondered to myself, is that who I want to be in this world? Just settling and just keep doing and trying to muster up this strength, just to keep going until my kids are old enough to move out. Yeah.
So what would you hope for this generation of women in your life, this next generation?
Yes, what I hope for is that I have set an example that my children can see, that they will always strive for their authentic happiness, that they will see patterns and try to break it. I've broken a lot of patterns in my family. I can't eradicate all of them. I'm not going to live that long. So I think I've eradicated some major ones, and I've demonstrated to them that they could have their life the way they want it to be. So what I'm hoping that they will continue that, to break patterns, because there's patterns to break, not just from my mother and the previous generation, but even from me. I have inherited some and I have created some. So my hope is for them to look at the behavior and not to continue something that is not conducive to their happiness, and for them to spread that out, for it to go out in the world. Once you begin doing that behavior, you affect everyone around you. So that is my hope, is that everybody challenge these patterns that's going on with these generational patterns and break them, so they can find who they are and really be happy.
So you want to give us some examples of what generational patterns might have shown up in life?
Yes, yes, so many. The main generational pattern I saw growing up is the way the female women treated their daughters and it wasn't in a loving way. They were really hard on their daughters. So as a child, when my mother because when I came here at 6 years old, it was the first time I was living with my mother. So I didn't know her at all until I was almost 7. And she started to demonstrate those behavior. And to watch her behavior with my grandmother. And then I used to, because I lived in Jamaica, my grandmother and my grandmother, I lived in that home, they had that behavior as well. So as a child, I used to just make mental notes to myself and say, I will not treat my child, write it down. I will say to my head, if nobody's around, I will scream it out and I'll say, I would not be a mother like this. I would not treat my children like this. And that was my affirmation. Now, 7, 8 years old, I didn't know that was called affirmation, but that's what I was, right. So I could have wrote those books because I was doing it, but I just wanted to have a different state of mind about raising a child. I wanted to have a different state of mind about choosing a husband, because they also chose very difficult relationship, abusive relationship. So I would say to myself or write down, I would not marry a man that would treat me like this, and I did not marry a man that treated me, to the mates they had. And when my children were born, I used to tell them every day tell them a lot, still do, that I love them, that I love you, I love you. I can't remember once where my parents as a child, mother or father, said, I love you. So that was one thing I always did. I love you, I love you, I love you. And still to this day, I tell them I love them. Yeah.
I love that. It's not just a book for women, though.
No.
This is generational patterns. What do you hope that men, especially young men, take away from this book?
The same thing that any woman would take away. Everyone has generational patterns, whether you're male or female. It's just written from my because I'm a female and the women in my family, but everyone have those traumas within themselves, and everyone has lost themselves, and everyone is having connected to their authentic happiness. So the book still applies to them as well.
So what do you think the difference is between eradicating generational patterns that you talk about and the idea of ancestral healing?
Right. So you have to start with eradicating the patterns for the healing. You just can't heal without facing what's traumatizing within you. You have to face that. So that's the first thing that has to be done. You have to look at that. And then the healing can begin. And you're not just healing yourself, you're healing the future. You're healing. My kids will not go through some things that I've gone through, so there's parts of that I've healed. And also generations before you. When I was writing this book, I was very skeptical about documenting the abuse that's in the book. I didn't really want people to see my mom in a certain light, but it was important for people to see what I went through. And I was still rattling with it within, and Sherry said, you got to write it so people have to understand. You can't just say your mother was mean because people won't get it. You have to be more specific. And one morning I got up to go to the restroom and came back, and I just felt this presence around me. And I knew it was my grandmother. I knew it was her. And I just clearly heard her say that I have to write the story. I have to put it out there. Now, my grandmother, when she was alive, would never have looked at generational traumas at all, or patterns or anything. So for her to say to me, yes, baby, you need to write that. That is your story. That means she understands. She's no longer with me, but she understands how important it is that the generation traumas and patterns need to go away.
one of the things that you write about that I find really unique is the idea of embodied horizons.
Yes.
And tell us where that phrase came from and who those people are in your life.
Right. So as a child, I can remember clearly back as 3 years old, seeing an horizon that was so spectacular in Jamaica at the beach that it captivated me. Like I couldn't even move, that it was so captivating. And it just moved something within me. And so later on, what it represented to me was God, or what higher power there is that is trying to alert you to something, and so that's something that's disembodied, that's not here. But there are people in your life that remind you, that's here to remind you of who you are, remind you of your greatness, people that's here to help you. So those to me are the physical being of the horizon, the embodied horizons. And my first embodied horizon was my great grandmother. When my mother left me at 5.5 months old, that's the person I lived with. And my twin brothers came along, and the three of us, it was just us and mama during the day. And it was the best time of my life, when it was everybody has gone to school and work. And the way she supported me and the way she loved me, to be honest, I wouldn't know what love is if it wasn't for her. She just loved on me so much and supported me and built my self-esteem. So she was the person that says, hey, this is who you are. Actually, one of the things she used to tell me, that I was not like everybody else, and to always remember that. So when I did something that was not pleasing, she never hit us, she never yelled, but she was stern, and she'll say to me, you are not like anyone else, and remember that. So she was my first embodied horizon.
And who were some of the other ones through your life that were important to you?
My godmother would be my second. When I was born, my godmother was in England. And when she came to Jamaica to see me, I was a couple months old, she brought a book for me. And she always brought me books. She was not a materialistic lady. She didn't feel like I need dolls or anything like that. She said, you need a book. And it was always books I couldn't read yet. But but she would read them to me. She'll get other people to read them to me. But so I had to read them. And so I have a love of books because of her. And she introduced me to a world that was beyond my little island, because she traveled a lot. She had stories, and these stories were in the books. And so she was another person that was there to remind me that my life was greater than where I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the questions we want readers to have is, who are your embodied horizons?
Yes.
And what does authentic happiness mean to you?
That's true. And I would like to say one more person, actually. When I was in high school, going through some issues, I almost dropped out of high school, by the way. And I had two favorite teachers, and one was Joan Hazard, and the other one was Maria Karvatakis. And I felt like I needed to go to school to tell Maria I wasn't coming back. And that was a no-no for her. She's like, no, you're going to finish school. And Joan Hazard was like, no, you're going to finish school. And those two people helped me finish high school because of them. So they are surprise embodied horizons. When I was at my lowest, I had no one to turn to. These two individuals came into my life. Miss Haddon, I have to call her Miss Hazard until this day. She does not accept Joan. Always, she picked me up every morning and drove me to school so I can get there and finish. And Maria got me a job so I can take care of myself and eat. So there were two embodied horizons that came along. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned God a minute ago, and so I want to point out that in one of your chapters, as a little girl, you're describing yourself reading, "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret, under the bed with a flashlight."
Mm-hmm.
And you also talk about God at different times of your life. One of my favorite lines in your whole book is, "Show me happiness, God. Show it to me."
Mm-hmm.
How did your views of God begin with Mama's views, and how did they change over time?
Yeah, mama is diehard Christian, doesn't wear pants, followed by the book, and always told me God was someone I can turn to. No matter how hard things were, God would change it around. So when I came to this country and things was hard, I was praying to what I call mama's God. And then God wasn't changing my situation because I'm like, send me back to Jamaica to be with mama. And because he didn't do that, I was like, you know what? You're just not real. I don't even know why mama even talk about you. Right. So for years, I didn't want to talk to God because he wasn't doing, what mama said. And I thought he was tricking mama or something. So I was like, no, I'm not going to deal with that. But as I got older, and visiting the horizon again, that's the feeling of God, just being in that sunset, or when you're in your quiet time, you can feel that presence of something reminding you of something or pulling you towards something or trying to help you with something. So I had to find a different connection to that greater power, that higher power than what mama experienced. So I had to find God for myself, and I found that through my quiet times, and had to learn how the horizon, how God works in my life. Yeah.
Well, one of your happiest memories.
Oh, so show me happiness, God. I'm sorry, I didn't put. Yeah. So as I was going through my issues and things, that was a thing. I was in a meditation one day and I wasn't happy and I couldn't figure out how to find this authentic happiness. And it came to me, I just said, show me happiness, God, show it to me. So it's something I just kept saying to myself for a while so I can have some direction. And at that point I learned God didn't work the way mama said he worked, but I knew it was a connection that I needed at the time, and it brought me through a lot of things. Yeah.
Did you feel like you saw glimmers of it then? Did you see answers?
All around me. Yeah, all around me. And it's not what you think, right? It's definitely not what you think. You have to go to if you want real change in your life, you have to go to the depths of your soul and you have to make those changes. And when you're in your quiet time, it's yes, I want to make these changes. But when you're back in the real world with folks and everybody around you, it is difficult because they're not seeing life the way it was shown to you. And I remember when I needed time to myself, when Camilla and Khaleel were young, and I would take some time to myself. And it was just the connection and how I felt peace and free. That was so important. I felt free. But when I went home and had to deal with all the things I had to deal with, it was different. So it was making that choice of, do I follow that pulling towards my authentic happiness, or do I settle in the life that I was creating? So that is how God shows up in my life. It's kind of my antagonizer, right? He's antagonizing me to go for it,
You talked about being at a crossroads and then realizing your mom had once been at the same crossroads.
Yeah. So those are the patterns. When I was quite depressed and didn't know what to do. And because I had everything and I didn't know what to say to people. And I called my mom and she's like, you have everything. What do you need? Why are you not happy? You know how many women would want your life? And I was angry with her at first, but then I realized I remember when I first came to this country, when I was almost 7, she wanted to divorce my father. And because my brothers and I cried, we didn't understand it. We just got there and we were happy, we had all these material things and we had that happiness. And all of a sudden she wanted to break that up and we couldn't understand that. So my brother and I cried and she stayed. So I realized after I hung up from that phone call that at that time, she was at that same crossroads I was at. And because she didn't move in the direction of her own happiness, she really didn't have an answer to tell me other than what she did, and that was staying.
Well, I want to invite you guys to, if you have any questions, think about those and raise your hand in a few minutes. I wanted to turn to Kadian's book cover because there's this amazing fruit that a friend named Anthony Simpson went traveling all over Jamaica to get actual live photos of this fruit for our cover. And then we had Keith Shepard drew the images that are at the front of each chapter, and Claude Pierreval then created digitized versions for us. So this ackee is a really important image for us aesthetically, but it's because there's a metaphor and it goes back to happy memories. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so this fruit is a common fruit in Jamaica. It's actually part of our national dish. We make it with codfish. Americans call it codfish. We call it saltfish, and it's ackee and saltfish. And we had a tree in our yard. We had an ackee tree in our yard. So an interesting story about the ackee is it comes into a pod, and if you notice, there's 3 in the pod. Sometimes you get 4, sometimes you get 2. Those are very rare, but it's normally 3 in a pod. But the interesting thing about an ackee, it's closed on the tree. If you pick it when it's closed and you open it yourself, it is poisonous. It will make you quite ill to almost feeling like death. It has to open on its own for you to prepare it and for you to eat it. So with my book, because I was born in Jamaica and there was so much references to Jamaica, I wanted Jamaica to be represented on the cover of my book. So of course, my nickname is within the title, my picture as a child, and the ackee fruit. And I thought about it. It was something Mama always picked, when I ate it so much as a child that to a point I didn't like it after a while because we had the tree. So, you ate it too much. And for years I didn't eat it. And then when I started eating again, I fell in love with it again. But it was just interesting with my brothers and I there with Mama picking the ackee and preparing it. And it just feels like what Mama wanted to do was keep us in our pod, in our little ackee pod, and just be who we are in this world. And she just let us play and do things and run around, things what children should do, and just put us in that pod and not put us out in the world too early before it's open and before we're poisoned, So that's one of the reference to the ackee. It reminds me of the way Mama, what she wanted for us as children, because when I landed here, I went from a 6-year-old to like a 26-year-old. So it's like my pod wasn't quite open and my mother forced it open and all of the poisons of the world seeped in and changed who I was, as a child. Yeah.
Well, we tried to have ackee fruit today, but it turned out it wasn't available. So.
And the reason why Anthony couldn't find it, it's not everywhere in Jamaica, it's seasonal. And it was actually in season, but Jamaica was having a drought at the time, and he couldn't find it. And because he knew I wanted for my book, he was driving all over Jamaica to find it. He finally found some and took some pictures for us.
Does anybody have a question for Kadian?
I do want to recognize somebody
Okay.
that's here. So I'd like to recognize Susan Chankina. Hi, Ms. Chankina. When I was quite depressed, and like I said before, the women in my family are strong. So we don't reach out to people. We try to keep things to ourselves and work on it. But when I got desperate, I don't know if Susan remember, I would call Susan and she would talk me through things. And she actually introduced me to a lady that, she told me that I needed therapy. And I remember you took me to my first therapist, and that didn't work out. We just didn't click. Nothing was wrong with her. And then I decided I didn't want to do it. And then when I started to even go even more deep into the depression, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Susan again, and she spoke to somebody, and we went to her house, and the lady spoke to me and found me a therapist that actually helped me a lot. So I love you. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Well, what's the most hopeful aspect, hopeful message that you hope comes out of your book?
My most hopeful message will be for everyone not to ignore that voice within themselves, not to ignore the antagonist within yourself. For that voice, that antagonist is reminding you of who you're supposed to be in this world and how you should feel in this world. So don't ignore that voice at all, and it seems like you're fighting an uphill battle, and you are fighting an uphill battle when you're trying to connect to your authentic happiness, because not everyone is going to agree. To be honest with you, everyone wants you to be the way they are because they're happy, but you have to be happy. And for you to do that, you have to ignore everyone. So I would say, don't ignore the antagonist, that voice that's antagonizing you to do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Because when I was younger, the things that I thought I liked, or I would say Charm liked, right, is not who I am. Is just not Kadian. So when I found Kadian, I started to discover things that I really like. Like I learned to swim at 47 years old. I love to swim. That's something Charm, she was afraid to get in the water, even come from an island, she's like, I wouldn't put my face in the water, I wasn't afraid of the water. I just didn't want to, I just don't like not feeling the bottom of the sea. That's it, But at 47, Kadian was coming out. And I wanted to learn to swim, and I learned to swim, and I go swimming on, I just love not feeling anything at the bottom. The other thing is Charm was her voice was quieted, and for a while I wanted to speak. I wanted to be on stage and speak, but Charm, that's not Charm at all. So when I started to move in that direction, and Kadian, I've started to become more of Kadian, I started to seek out things that will help me overcome that fear. And that's when I joined Toastmasters to overcome, because that's Kadian. Those are the things Kadian is doing. And whenever I did those things, I am extremely happy. When I'm doing things that I was raised to do or taught to do, I am not happy. So don't give up on that voice that's antagonizing you, because once you find happiness, it never stops, because there's levels to happiness. And it's time for you to get out your comfort zone and receive more, and you just keep going.
Well, I think we should wrap up so that folks here can have book signing with you.
Oh,
we have a question? Oh, yay. No, please.
and you have one here too? Oh, we have one here too.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we have time, so.
No, you go first. You go.
Yeah, Khaleel.
Mm-hmm. 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 That's a great question. Because he's right. I was just writing, and I didn't understand the book world. I didn't know how that worked. And at that time, self-publishing was becoming a big thing. And I looked into that, and I actually was working with a company, but they were trying to change my voice. They're trying to change my story a little bit. And I didn't like the direction where they were going. So I put that aside. And honestly, I didn't know what to do, because I had the story. And that's how Ainsley came in, which is very nice, because I called him one day to talk to him. And he said, how's your book coming along? And I said, such and such. He said, hey, my editor is here and she's launching her publishing company. Let me connect you. And it was and Shelly, and that's how I would say once I met Shelly, that was it, because she really understood my direction. Actually, it was through an email. I sent you an email, and it's her response that made me say she was it, because she understood what I wanted with my book. So that's how that happened. Thank you.
Do have a question from online. Number one is from Violet Hayward.
Mhm.
And earlier she said, "Hey, girlfriend, love you so much." And her question is, from your observation, have you seen the evolution of love and happiness in your children?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the question is, have I seen the evolution of love and happiness within my children? And I would say absolutely yes. And some things I'm not going to say because it'll be in the next book. But with my children, as far as love is, there's so much love in my home, not just between me and them, their father as well, and them. And even though we are divorced, we still operate as a loving family. So they're very close, they have their little argument and whatever, but they're tight and they love each other. And that's an area I didn't have as a child. The funny thing is, my twin brothers and I loved each other dearly. We just didn't have that, that cohesiveness with our parents, but the three of us loved each other. And there wasn't love in the home like that because they believe material things were love. So the evolution of love, absolutely, with saying it, demonstrating it, of course, with my children. And happiness, for them, they have to create their own happiness. But one thing I love about them is, and I think it's partially because of me, I'm gonna take credit. They do question their happiness because they've seen me do it. And they do question, am I happy here? And they are strong enough and confident enough to make that change. And so I'm going to go in that direction, which is totally different from their grandmother and so much different than when I was younger. Yeah. So thank you, Violet.
Oh, we got a question back there.
I remember meeting you 5 years ago or so,
Yes.
and you were part of Toastmasters, and you told us you're going to stop doing that to concentrate on your book. And I thought that was such a great thing to do that I didn't think I would ever do something, but it did inspire me to go back to school. So I just want to let you know that you did inspire me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kattlin. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that. Oh, yeah. So Kattlin wanted to thank me for inspiring her to go back to school, because I was in the middle of Toastmasters and I really wanted to focus on that. I wanted my focus there, and I met Shelly, and I have to do that. And I couldn't do all the things I was doing in Toastmasters. I was doing a lot. It was taking up a lot of my time. So I had to give it a break to focus. So Kattlin said that inspired her to go back to school and put her focus there. And I'm so glad you did. I think Sierra had a question.
So in Charm, were you to see you today,
Mhm,
see the work that you've done,
mhm,
and see the life that you've built for yourself?
mhm. I think she'll be, she wanted to know if Charm could see me today, which she does see me today, and all the work I've done and put in, how do I think she would feel? That's your question, right? Charm would feel very relieved. She's very relieved because she carried a lot of burden on her shoulders. When I didn't connect to myself, even as a child and then into an adult, she was carrying a lot of burden because I hadn't fully embodied Kadian yet. So when I think of Charm, I think of her 6 years old, that child that landed here at 6 years old and was just stuck in that spot and all that work and burden put on her. She just never had a chance to be free and grow up. So as I was going through my teenage life and my 20s, it was still her burden. So now she's at peace. She's relieved because I've connected to who I'm supposed to be, was really Kadian, and I've taken the reins over so she can relax now. Sure.
Go for it.
I remember the time that when I had just finished high school, I was high school, and I remember you wanted to travel, and you weren't sure if you could travel because well, I mean, for your children, so I was still a baby, but we said, go ahead and travel because it's okay. Make sure she's fed,
Okay, what's the question? What's the question?
You feel like your active side was trying to keep yourself like an excuse not to go out and travel and not see the world or explore what you're happy to.
It's actually the opposite. My antagonist side was telling me it's time to be Kadian and do the things that I love to do. But because maybe I was a little overprotective of a mom, that even though they were in high school, I wasn't ready to let go. And by the way, my children are quite independent. They've been independent from the moment they came out the womb. They don't really need my help. But I just feel like I need to be there all the time. And so when I did travel, I used to like cook for the whole week and put in the freezer for them and make sure you feed your little sister. Not like she couldn't use the stove, right? But yeah, my Kadian knew they were okay. I just needed to let go. And it was time for me to embark on that journey to live the life that I'm supposed to live, but I was still holding back a little bit because I'm like, they're not 18 yet and so on. But it would be more my antagonist side that was pushing for me to go forth. And my protagonist, because of what I know growing up, that you make sure your kids are fine and you got to wait till they're a certain age, that I wanted to stay and make sure you guys were okay, not realizing, or I realized it, but was not really paying, giving you guys the credit of you can take care of yourself. I didn't need to be there. They're very strong children, they go toe to toe with me. They're very strong and they can handle themselves, so I just needed as a mom to let go at that point. Thank you, my son. So my son and I, we walk a lot together and we have very deep conversations together. When we're walking, we're in the house with all three of my children, but because he works at night, during the day he's home. So we walk a lot together and we have deep conversations. They're very old souls. Thank you.
You have a question?
So my question would be, what's next for Miss Kadian?
Oh, what's next for Miss Kadian? Kadian is going to continue to build on her happiness. So the next level is the next level of growth. It just doesn't stop. The antagonist is going to come back. You've achieved the level. It's like a video game. You achieved the level, but there's more to go. So once I'm settled in, I'm like, I'm good. I achieved this. I did that. Right now the book is finished and we're good. I know no time is going to be like, hey, there's more happiness, there's more growth, there's more of you to connect to. So right now I'm just enjoying that I have finally finished, and this is a great achievement that I've done, and wait for that next inkling that will come along and say, hey, it's time to move, because you should never settle.
You did allude to another book coming. So do you want to give us a preview of what you want to write about next?
Yeah, I wanted to do a follow-up to Leaving a Charmed Life. because where the book stops, it stops in 2012. Yeah, so there's a lot of more information since then that's interesting to write about, and a lot of growth with my children and what they have experienced after their father and I divorced, and how they have become so much more aware about what life, how life throw you, lemons and what you should do. So there's so much more stories, and how what I have done, how it's impacted their life. Yeah, so it'll be the follow-up, be like a second memoir.
All good books need a sequel. Well, I wanted to let you know, we have these little cards that are by the books, but they're about how you can help Kadian's book make a splash. Because I believe when we make a good splash, then we also create really good ripples. And the ripples are more people hearing Kadian's message about authentic happiness and the importance of breaking generational patterns. So some of the ideas on the card are to tell your friends about Kadian's book. We would really love it after you read it if you post an honest review at Amazon or wherever you bought the book, because those reviews really do help other people see why to buy the book too. If you could ask your local library to order a copy, then your neighbors can also read it. And it's just great to get books like this into libraries today. You can invite Kadian to chat with your book club. You could suggest Kadian as a speaker on podcasts or for other groups that you might know, other Toastmasters clubs, perhaps. You could take a picture with Kadian and or her book and post it on social media. Buy it as a gift for someone, and share and post on any of the social media channels, because it really helps to spread the word. Oh, we have one more question.
Is it audio format?
It is not yet in audio format. We see a lot of yes, please. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Participating.
Thank you. Thank you.